to try to take away Black History Month. They want to introduce Don Julio in a Popeyes collaboration, and that straight up out of their clone Tyrone. They're about to take away Black History Month, and it's going to be under the guise of doing it for the better of the world, because no one should have that.
Breaking news, a new poll released out of Alabama today shows that 100% of MAGA voters support Donald Trump's initiative to remove DEI from the government. When asked what DEI was, though, however, 75% of them said that is where Black people and gays in dresses get jobs over white people.
No. Federal agencies will not be allowed to acknowledge, recognize, or celebrate Black History Month. Black History Month is canceled under Trump. CIA employees were told all resource and affinity groups are canceled. No Black History Month or MLK celebration or any other ethnic recognition months. DEI folks are to be fired rather than allowed to rotate to former offices.
African Americans built this nation. You built this nation. You know, you're just starting to get real credit for that. Okay, I don't know if you know that. You're just starting to get, you built the nation. We all built it, but you were such a massive part of it.
This morning, the world's largest retailer says it's rolling back some of its diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. Walmart, which employs more than 1.5 million Americans, joins a list of major corporations revising DEI initiatives. The company saying every decision comes from a place of wanting to foster a sense of belonging, to open doors to opportunities for all our associates, customers, and suppliers.
Black people built America. Black people is the cornerstone of America. And to have President Trump, with just a stroke of a pen, to literally undermine the promotion and the teaching of Black history in America, that is not right. People, let me give credit to all the persons video who have compiled here. This is a tough topic, but let's ride into the video.
We teach the 1619 Project because that's when we went to England, to the town of Hull, and bought a bunch of human beings whom the British brought from Africa to bring here to sell to us for the slave trade. That's when we study Black people? No, we should be studying Black people from 10,000 years ago. But teachers will say, well, that's prehistorical. That is the truth. We need to teach the truth. The first Black people who came here were not brought here as slaves. They came here as discoverers and explorers between 20,000 and 10,000 years before Columbus was born.
The main idea in my book is to show that early America before the coming of Columbus, was a far more complex society than people imagined, and that it involved Africans. Africans came in here. They came in on several occasions. Sometimes these were accidents, sometimes they were on purpose, and that they had an influence, an actual impact, an influence upon the formation of certain American civilizations.
When we say pre-Columbus period, what are we talking about?
We're talking about long before 1492. It is absurd, and only fools can still believe that Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492. In fact, Columbus never even came to this continent. Columbus wandered about in the Caribbean islands just on the very edge of the great civilizations. Cortez came here in 1519, and he entered Mexico. And Mexico, when I speak of Mexico in this program, do not confuse it simply with the Mexico we know today. That was a center of a civilization that spread over a great part of this continent. That when Cortez entered, he had come out of the heart of Europe, and he said when he entered Native America, when he entered Mexico, and he saw the pyramids and the palaces and the floating gardens and the zoos and the aqueducts and the running baths, he says, I have not seen its like in Europe.
So the main idea in your book, you were dealing with that initially.
The main idea in my book is that there were visits to this continent from the old world, that there were visits to the Native Americans in this continent, and those visits included Africans. And two of the visits of Africans were major and significant, and they affected American civilization. And American civilization was far more complex, far more advanced than was formerly believed. Earth satellites a few months ago revealed that the Native Americans, long before the coming of Europeans, had the most intricate network of irrigation canals ever discovered in agriculture.
Did Africans start the slave trade in America? Western Africa already had its own system of slave ownership when Europeans started to purchase slaves there in the 15th century. But the Atlantic slave trade from Africa to the Americas was different from any other type of slavery that had existed before it. A person being labeled as a slave because of the color of their skin was a lifetime sentence. Slavery in most other cultures around the world could be based on a lot of things. Criminals were often enslaved, people who owed debts were enslaved until they could work off those debts, and some slaves were prisoners of war. The Europeans that colonized the Americas were already enslaving the natives that lived here. The African kings and merchants that sold their slaves to the Americas for weapons and other goods had no way of knowing the brutality that the Europeans were capable of, or that their fellow Africans would essentially be used to breed a new slave race in the Americas. Europeans acted of their own accord when bringing African slaves to the Americas. The African warlords they bribed cannot be absolved of responsibility, but the creation of a system of generational slavery that justified the ownership of another human being based solely on the color of their skin, that's a uniquely European invention.
I have to give it some more history for you to understand how black people have been exploited before I get into the meat and potatoes of the video.
Why are black folks in the U.S. so much poorer on average than the rest of the country? In very simple terms, it's because of the racial wealth gap. The disparities in wealth accumulation between the rich and the poor in the U.S. become even more extreme when you take race into account. The net worth of a typical white family in the U.S. is nearly 10 times what the net worth of a typical black family is in the U.S. But why is that? From the very founding of this country, the systems of government, corporate enterprise, and societal structures were designed to lock black people out of any opportunities to accumulate wealth or pursue education as other groups did. We've only begun to acknowledge and address these disparities in the last 50 years or so, and we've still got a long way to go to right the wrongs of the past. After 240 years of slavery, where it was illegal for black people to be educated, you had another 60 years of legal segregation with Jim Crow laws, which I talked about in an earlier series. And it wasn't that long ago. Both my parents were born into the Jim Crow era. In the next video, I'm going to talk about banking and housing discrimination, which greatly affects generational wealth.
You see, the average black family passes on, listen to this, $0 to the next generation. Yep, I said 0. That means when somebody dies, the family gets nothing. No wonder we cry so much at funerals. We're grieving twice, grieving over losing a loved one and grieving that they didn't leave us anything. You see, other ethnic groups leave wills, but we leave bills. Well, what does Proverbs 13:22 say? A good person leaves an inheritance to his children's children. That means our money should impact at least 3 generations. It should impact ours, our children's, and our grandchildren's. So we have to start building generational wealth.
There's no Black Wall Street operating for our people. And when I say Black Wall Street, I mean a Black-owned bank, Black-owned school, Black-owned supermarket, Black-owned hospital, and a Black-owned manufacturing and distribution network to give our people jobs and provide them with the basic commodities they need for everyday living. Those 5 institutions are the essence of an independent community. We are $2 trillion people. $2 trillion, the richest group of Africans in the world in terms of income. No Black Wall Street. So the financial restructuring of the way we think, our priorities, our values, and most of all, our spending habits must be a priority if we're going to change this situation.
Why is the inner city filled with so many black people as white folks flock to the suburbs? Generational wealth building is directly tied to home ownership. For decades, black people were largely shut out of that system. In the 1930s, under Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, the newly created Federal Housing Authority gave money to builders who mass-produced homes in the suburbs. The federal government stipulated that none of those homes could be sold to black buyers. This was federal policy. So for white folks, you had subsidized housing in the suburbs. For black folks, you had subsidized housing projects in the inner city. Home ownership in white families increased exponentially after World War II through the GI Bill. Many black vets were systematically shut out of that process too. You can see how this sets up a feedback loop. If your parents and grandparents weren't able to accumulate any wealth through home ownership, not only do they have nothing to pass down to you, but you're more likely to deplete your resources by taking care of them in their old age. And you're less likely to have any accumulated wealth to pass down to your children. In 2021, only 44% of black families are homeowners versus 73% of white families.
You know, it always blows my mind that many other ethnicities who just migrate to America will literally look down on black people without understanding the history. And it's our history who have paved the way for them to be enjoying the success today.
Okay. And I think it's an embarrassment that white people aren't like, it goes like this, okay? It goes, brown are the wealthiest income earners and asset owners in America.
Brown meaning what?
Indian.
Indian. Okay.
Then it's Asian.
Okay.
I think you guys are right there, number 3.
The Jews?
Number 3 spot, because y'all get into a whole bunch of other bullshit.
There's not that many of us, though. There's way less Jews than
no, 100%. But I
yeah.
mean, by GDP and by population, you guys are like outstanding, outliers.
Whatever it takes, conservatives must liberate America's children from the captivity of these Marxist teachers' unions. That's what they are. Where do they come from? Across the country, we need to implement strict prohibitions on teaching inappropriate racial, sexual, and political material to America's school children in any form whatsoever. And if federal bureaucrats are going to push this radicalism, we should abolish the Department of Education.
No, 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 no.
African Americans built this nation. You built this nation. You know, you're just starting to get real credit for that. Okay, I don't know if you know that. You're just starting to get, you built the nation. We all built it, but you were such a massive part of it. Bigger than you were given credit for. Does that make sense? Right? But through generations of blood, sweat, and tears, and you deserve a government that defends your interests, protects your families, and cares for our own citizens first. My administration is fighting with everyone and all our heart to reverse the pain inflicted by Democrat leaders and to deliver hope and opportunity and prosperity for all Americans, but for African American communities all throughout our land.
The devil! Oh, yeah.
President Trump's expanded his crackdown on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, revoking a 60-year-old executive order signed by then-President Lyndon B. Johnson, banning hiring discrimination by federal contractors. On Wednesday, the Trump administration also ordered federal employees to report on their colleagues who refused to comply with orders to purge DEI initiatives threatening adverse consequences for workers who fail to report their co-workers. This comes a day after the Trump administration placed employees in any federal DEI offices on immediate administrative leave.
I can't figure it out. How can the president say that he loves black people when he's literally moving out the foundation from under our feet?
I'm responding with a video because this is important. Black history is not only being banned in schools, it's being banned in all of our texts. They're banning a lot of Black history books and they're taking them off of the shelves, not to mention the archives. There is a man, I'm going to try to put his information in the description below if I can find it. He has been uploading almost all of the Black related archives for the past month and some change, I think, and it's hundreds of thousands, and they're just they're deleting them by the day, hundreds of thousands by the day related to Black history. And there is a reason for that. That is why my nonprofit is fighting to make sure that Black history is not forgotten. Somebody has to give a about this. Quick little ad, if you want one of these, it says the Black Party Foundation. It is a gold lapel. You can donate more than $10 to my nonprofit using the link tree in my bio. It's cute, it goes with everything, why not? But anyway, my nonprofit, the way that this is going to work, it's going to be an extracurricular or co-curricular activity within the schools. The schools will not have to pay for this. We're working on government contracts. I'm getting all that figured out. I'm getting all that worked out. But we will be an extracurricular activity that teachers will educate students. It exists. And I put emphasis on that because I can see that being a problem, but I have a way of making sure that it gets done, that it's recommended, and that students are aware that this program exists.
Federal agencies will not be allowed to acknowledge, recognize, or celebrate Black History Month. Black History Month is canceled under Trump. CIA employees were told all resource and affinity groups are canceled. No Black History Month or MLK celebration or any other ethnic recognition months. DEI folks are to be fired rather than allowed to rotate to former offices. CIA is also apparently banning lanyards that have to do with affinity groups. Women's councils how to take down their website and cancel all event, including Women's History Month. They are also compiling a list of members within affinity groups. It's almost as if they're trying to rewind the time to 1940. This is crazy. This is very crazy.
What the hell we gonna do now?
We need to stop shopping at Walmart and we need to do it now. I'm like so frustrated with the US. I'm so ready to get up out of here because if you just pay close attention to what is going on, these corporations, politicians, they will all show you what they're about. Walmart just rolled back their diversity, equity, and inclusion program. And the reason why they're doing it is because they're receiving a growing pressure from conservative activists who said, hey, do this or else. And if you follow the money, you will always follow the problem. They've already dismantled affirmative action in colleges. And let's just break down why that existed anyway. The reason why affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs were needed in the first place was to address systemic inequalities and historical discrimination in the US. These programs provide opportunities to people who are marginalized because of race, ethnicity, and gender. And while we all love to believe that these things don't exist, the truth is they do. If opportunities weren't denied based on gender or race or your background, we wouldn't need diversity, equity, and inclusion. But let's be real. This is why when you look at certain neighborhoods, you don't see people who look like me. When you go to universities, especially Division I private schools, you don't see a lot of people who look like me. And what's sad about all of this is that a lot of critics will argue that these programs create unfair advantages, particularly for other applicants who don't even have to worry about these types of things. That's not what it's about. Because if you've never been disadvantaged in the first place, how is it going to cause a disadvantage to you? I wish we lived in a world that was loving of all people, accepting of all people, no group seeking to dominate another group or seeking to stay superior to another group. It's just so tiring. But one thing I do know is that we, the people, have a lot of power. We have power because these businesses need our dollars to succeed. And guess what? A lot of them rely on our dollars. And I don't care what your background or race is, just like in 2020, we need to all rally with each other and we need to fight for what's right. And you know what? Maybe the time is just coming for judgment on America because I don't know about you, but I definitely feel a shift. So maybe it's all part of God's plan. I don't know. What do you think?
Should black people boycott companies like Walmart and Target who have rolled back their DEI?
Let me try to explain DEI for people who don't understand DEI, who don't like it. So to them, they think that all DEI means is that there's an unqualified woman or an unqualified person of color who's given a job or promotion and they don't deserve it. When in actuality, all that says is that instead of doing word of mouth recruitment, instead of just hiring the usual suspects, we're going to look beyond and find qualified, talented people outside the usual suspects. That's all that means. So the people they hire are qualified. It's just kind of like as if you went into a town and you never got the contract because you were new to the town. And then one day they say, you know what, let's let people who aren't new to the town have opportunities. And you finally get your big shot. And you know your quality of work is better than the people who are in the town who always get the bids. And because they decide to look beyond the usual suspects, you get a bid. That's all DI is. It doesn't mean you're not qualified. It just means someone opened up the door to give you an opportunity, a chance. That's all it is. Get it? Got it? Good.
Okay, specifically to my people of color and to the community that cares about my black brothers and sisters, I need y'all to pay attention because I told you before the DEI policy setback and how they're taking all of that away was a guise. It was a blanket. Part 2 was them allowing police officers to no longer need reform and no longer be investigated for the mistreatment of certain individuals like ourselves. I know some people like to negate that our number one enemy is really the police when it comes to people of color, black people, but we all know that they were out here basically right in between the face like they did the woman over the pot of hot water. Nevertheless, they want us to act a monkey fool. They're about to try to take away Black History Month. They want to introduce Don Julio in a Popeyes collaboration, and that straight up out of they clone Tyrone. They're about to take away Black History Month, and it's going to be under the guise of doing it for the better of the world, because no one should have that, right? Like they always say. I'm telling you right now, they're going to try to keep us sedated, medicated, quiet, and unaware. If y'all take y'all ass to Popeyes for a Don Julio collaboration like y'all did that sandwich, you're going to be on my block list. It's time for us to let Target go. DEI policies gone. We no longer on and find out. They're going to find out for around. Got it? Now, we're not going to act surprised when Donald Trump gets on here and writes out Black History Month, because we have a whistleblower who is Mark Zaid, the D.C. attorney known for handling cases regarding national security, security clearances, government whistleblowing, freedom of speech claims, responded to President Donald Trump's order not merely to cut all DEI incentives in the federal government, but also demanding that all federal employees expose any colleagues who have anything to do with the DEI type programs. This is the man who is coming forward saying he is going to axe Black History Month, and he don't want us to be surprised. Hold them dollars until we can go to only Black-owned communities, Black-owned compounds, Black-owned campuses. We're not around. They take away Black History Month, they're going to want us to act the ass, and we need to be coming together now. Please share this. Let our sisters and brothers know.
Honestly, people, she has a very, very valid point.
Breaking news, a new poll released out of Alabama today shows that 100% of MAGA voters support Donald Trump's initiative to remove DEI from the government. When asked what DEI was, though, however, 75% of them said that is where black people and gays in dresses get jobs over white people. When explained that that was not exactly what DEI was, that it was actually a service in which it could help handicapped people who needed certain kinds of accessory tools. Maybe if they're deaf, they might need an interpreter. They then said, oh, you mean the broken people? We should get rid of them too.
Black jobs? He was talking about construction jobs, laborers, welders, masons, carpenters.
If only there was a website. Oh, that's right. The Department of Labor lists all the statistics of who works what. I'm going to just annihilate my group. African Americans account for 6.2% of construction jobs, while Hispanics hold down 30.4%. Laborers are 11.8% African American, while Hispanics are 26.7%. Welders, 9%. Hispanic folks, 16.7%. Masons, 6.3%. Hispanic people, 35.1%. Carpenters, 7.1%. Hispanic people, 23.9%. It's almost as if this information is readily available, but we just don't want to look at it unless it agrees with our narrative. Google also has this really cool new feature where if you look stuff up, it tells you. So I looked up jobs that are predominantly African American when it comes to the majority. Healthcare support, transportation, security and law enforcement, child care and social assistance, and personal care and services. So where are we going to put the goalpost now?
And our history, because Black history by definition is political.
That's right.
Because Black people by definition are political, right? Our history is political because every story of American greatness, every story of American exceptionalism you want to tell, here we are off to the corner. Say, how do you explain us?
That's right.
If all this is true, why are we here? If all this is true, how do you explain how you suppressed our rights for 350 years? How you bought and sold our ancestors, how you claim to be democratizing Europe, but denying violently democracy for Black people here. So we're the most inconvenient people to the story of American exceptionalism. Right. So they want to ban our history because we give lie, right? We reveal the lie of this country.
Right.
And we are heroes of that story. So what the research shows is that when you teach Black children Black history, they do better academically.
Absolutely.
This is not shocking.
That's right. It's right.
Right? If you see yourself in the story, then you have a powerful sense of who you are.
Is she correct in that statement?
DEI did not benefit black people en masse. It benefited a couple of token blacks. And I'm sorry, y'all gonna lose your little token benefits. But DEI did not benefit the masses of African people. Barack Obama is the first president to use the words diversity, equity, and inclusion in his DEI initiative that he signed in August of 2011, mandating that the federal government take steps to diversify, include, and guarantee equity for minorities. But it was all about the rainbow. That law was about immigrants and rainbow gangers. It was not about black people. Yes, you have a few black people who are going to lose some DEI benefits. But we are 42 million. And when we add our African immigrant brothers and sisters in, we're about 45, 48. I'm going to round it up because they always suppress our numbers. I'm going to round it up to 50 million Africans in America. Somebody help me understand how Barack Obama's DEI has benefited black people in these past 16 years. Help me understand. Affirmative action is not the same as DEI. Affirmative action was destroyed by George Bush in the opening years of the 21st century. He destroyed it. The Supreme Court destroyed it. Affirmative action has not been a governmental priority since Lyndon Baines Johnson. Affirmative action has been dead. Affirmative action been dead. That's why Barack Obama called it diversity, equity, and inclusion. Why didn't Barack Obama call it affirmative action? Why didn't Barack Obama call it affirmative action? Why didn't Barack Obama call it affirmative action? I'll tell you why Barack Obama didn't call it affirmative action. Barack Obama didn't call it affirmative action because he didn't want it associated with black people. He didn't want it associated with black people. You're fighting for something that was not created to help you. Let me say it again for the kunocracy in the back. You're fighting for something that was not created to help you. Let me say it one more time. You're fighting for something that wasn't created to help you. They are distracting you from your main fights. We should be fighting against mass incarceration. We should be fighting against miseducation. We should be fighting against police genocide. We should be fighting against economic apartheid. We should be fighting against homelessness and gentrification. Not Nelly for performing, not Snoop Dogg, not Black History, and not DEI.
Do you agree with Dr. Umar Johnson? They said a person without a history is like a tree without roots. It is important for Black history to be taught.
I just wanted to remind everybody that the United States is 4% of the entire world's population. That means 96% of all living human beings are outside of your country. I promise you, your experiences in Virginia are not the truth of the universe. I promise you, my experiences in Florida is not the truth of the universe. I promise you, your experiences when you went to university in California is not the truth of the universe. Many times, as people who live in America, we fail to understand how truly massive the world is and how it definitely does not revolve around us. And whenever you actually had to acknowledge someone else's existence, you were still the main character. People do food a lot differently and it works for them. People do marriage a lot differently and it works for them. People do prisons a lot differently, crime a lot differently and it works for them. People do work a lot differently than it works for them. But why am I wording it like that? Because if it works for them, that means it could work for you. Learn somebody else's language. Learn how other people understand time, understand sex, understand money, understand community. If you give yourself the chance to explore the world outside of you, not only will you learn more about yourself, about the people around you, but equally as importantly, you'll learn more about this weird blue and green ball that you've been put on.
On that note, I want to thank you for watching this video. See you in the next one. Peace.
Sun is shining, the weather is sweet.